Alright, hello everyone. I'm super excited to be sharing with you today a astrology report for the full moon in Capricorn and partial lunar eclipse that's happening this upcoming Tuesday, July 16th in Burlington, Vermont, and it'll be happening around 5:30 in the evening. And yeah, for those of you who've been following along with my videos, I usually do videos on the full moons and the new moons and sort of use them as an anchor point to talk about the astrology that's going on around the full new moon and new moon, and also sort of look ahead at what's kind of coming down the pipes and sort of just like some of the more general themes for this time as well. And I think the way that I started learning about astrology was by listening to YouTube videos and hearing people just talk about the astrology of the current context. And I think for anyone who's like interested in kind of learning about astrology or deepening your understanding of astrology, I think though these videos may be kind of jargony at times to folks who are not as interested in that, my hope is that for people who are interested in learning about astrology, these videos can be helpful by providing just a little bit of kind of some of the details of what's going on, and then for folks who are not really interested, that there's not too much of that and there is information that you can glean that will be helpful. So if anyone has any thoughts or feedback about that, definitely feel free to reach out and let me know if you're someone who watches these, because I just don't know who is watching these videos. So yeah, today is a particularly intense day, and it is Saturday, July 14th at around 1:40 in the afternoon, and today is sort of setting us up for the full moon that's coming up. We have a opposition today between the Sun in Cancer at 24 degrees of Cancer and 21 degrees of Cancer, and Pluto at 21 degrees of Capricorn. And for anyone who's been following along the last few videos, I've been talking a lot about this like heavy Cancer Capricorn kind of tension that has been happening for a good bit now, particularly over this last month and a bit before, as Mars and Mercury moved through Cancer, and then the Sun, and right now Mars and Mercury are both in Leo, Sun is in Cancer, Venus is in Cancer, North Node of the Moon is in Cancer, and in Capricorn we have Saturn, Pluto, the Moon on the day of the total lunar eclipse, and the South Node of the Moon. So I'm going to talk a bunch about sort of what's kind of coming out of this tension, because yeah, I think around the new moon and the solar eclipse, I think there was a bit of respite from what's been a pretty just like intense and ongoing. I mean, it's kind of always just keeps going. But I think it was a fun, kind of playful little bit of time, and now we're kind of back in some intense territory again, as we're coming up to this full moon. So the Cancer-Capricorn axis is about, well, first of all, when two signs are opposed to one another, the way that Cancer and Capricorn are, often they appear to kind of be total opposites. And I think a lot of times when people see oppositions, they think things are incompatible. I like to think that the opposing signs hold the medicine to each other. So it's really a time of tension, but ultimately I think a lot of growth can come from these periods of time where there's like heavy oppositions that are happening. And so in Cancer right now, with kind of these personal planets, and Cancer's the inner world, the home, family, really kind of tender emotional vulnerability, crying, all of these things, pretty personal inner world. Capricorn is the outer world, and in Capricorn we have these kind of like bigger like Saturn is like authority and structure in its home sign, Saturn ruling Capricorn, really strong there, and in a lot of ways I think calling us into our integrity as it moves through Capricorn. But in this particular moment, it's kind of, there can be this, and then Pluto, which is kind of ruthless, like truth as ugly, as intense, as messed up as it could possibly be, kind of coming at you cold and direct and like not really caring if it's gonna upset you. And Cancer then being on the receptive sort of mode is the sort of deep sensitivity of the inner world. And I think this is a time right now where it's really important to be loving ourselves really tenderly, as things might be going really wild in the outer world. So the outer world being ruled by Capricorn and the inner world being ruled by Cancer. And there's this idea in magic that the inner world and the outer world are in relationship with one another. They're distinct, and yet they're in kind of constant mirroring. And so this inner world stuff is like healing, like getting into our wounds, and like things that are happening in the outer world are like triggering things in the inner world that can be really important, and sort of shining a light on like areas where we are just really kind of deeply sensitive, wounded, shadowy elements of the inner world. And so I think that for people who are interested in sort of growth and that this can be a really awesome time to sort of, and this is really, I think really challenging things are probably going on right now, so this might not be like a message that feels appropriate, and so if it doesn't, then that's totally okay. But I think that there's a lot to be learning from the outer world, and sort of this, there's this concept also in magic of the united will, of sort of the subconscious and the soul and kind of the conscious mind, the spirit being in relationship with one another, and sort of the united will being this whole, when you're saying, this is what I want in my life, this is what I want to manifest in the outer world. If it's a job, if it's a passion project, if it's a relationship, whatever it might be, sort of that you're wanting to create or manifest in the outer world, when you are speaking from the voice of the united will, it's going to truly meet and nourish your desires. Whereas when you're speaking from just the spirit and the soul is not really being listened to, which often I think is the case more than kind of the other way around, when you're just sort of working in this more rational, pragmatic, materialistic kind of space that we're in, and the soul is not sort of, we're not looking at our shadows, we're not looking at areas of wounding, we're not kind of getting into it, getting emotional, getting into the like raw emotional stuff, then what happens in the outer world continues to not really meet our expectations of what we want or what we desire. And so, I think this can be a time where things in the outer world are sort of looking really crazy and like we're hitting up against walls, hitting up against restrictions, or this like truths are coming out about things that are really kind of intense or volatile, or and we've got I think just in general with the Mercury retrograde that's also happening right now, like this is a time where things could get really like intense and like really hot and really emotional, and that if there is the moment to sort of like take a breath before before reacting. I think Cancer can be pretty reactive because it's just very raw, so when it sort of gets pricked, it makes me think of like a kid who's like flustered or like throwing a tantrum, like like so emotional, can't sort of like control, like the emotions take the wheel, and that's it, totally out of control. And so I think Capricorn, just the Capricorn and Cancer energy together are such an interesting balance of like working on healthy emotional processes that then allow us to kind of show up in our integrity to community, really, and to the outer world. I think this is also a time of like the south node of the moon. So the north and south nodes of the moon are the axis on which the eclipses happen. So right now the north node of the moon is in Cancer. It's at 17 degrees of Cancer, and the south node of the moon is in Capricorn, 17 degrees of Capricorn. And the north node is sort of like, where are we moving towards collectively? Where are we moving towards? And the south node is, where are we coming from? From what shadowy elements of the sign that the south node is in are we releasing in order to kind of move towards the gifts of the north node sign. So in this case, moving south node in Capricorn is like taking a look at the shadowy stuff having to do with Capricorn, which can be around control, can be around like self-sufficiency in this like kind of intense way, can be around power accumulation, wanting to kind of hoard power and cling on, or have control or power over other people or things or situations. And that could be definitely like a response to this sort of like pricking that's happening of the inner world, and this kind of like deep sensitivity that we're being felt. But with the north node in Cancer, I think we're really being called to be in that, like just that there's a lot of vital information that like our emotions, we learn a lot from our emotions, and we live in a culture that doesn't really provide any space to both like sit with and really process, and like this can be exhausting kind of stuff going on right now, and like, but we all have to like go to work. Capricorn is the outer world, like responsibility, authority figures, feeling sort of like disempowered or feeling like weak or a victim of systems, with Pluto on Saturn, systems that are fucked up and that we can like see are super fucked up. So yeah, this can be a time, I think, of feeling a lot of responding in these kinds of ways, wanting to kind of like control. And the south node of the moon, I think, in Saturn and Pluto also, it's like shame and guilt and like just feeling not powerful, not worthy, feeling ashamed for the intensity of whatever's maybe coming up for you right now. And so I think that's definitely something to be aware of, and kind of like releasing and letting go of that shame, I think would be a really helpful way to move through this time. The other kind of like, there's so many things going on, but Neptune is also aspecting a ton of planets. It's sextiling with Saturn and Pluto in the south node. It is trining with Venus and the Sun, and squaring Jupiter. So there's going to be a Neptune in Pisces, where it has been for a long time. There can be a lot of confusion, and I think with the Mercury retrograde that's about to dip back into Cancer, this can be just like a time of confusion, sort of surreal, trippy, dreamlike. And with this ongoing trine that we've had between Jupiter and Neptune, I think this is this sort of undercurrent or theme of this time is like expansion and growing and optimism and hope. and versus intention with like delusion, like where are we being excessive, where are we how are we can allow those two to work really well together, this like dreaming, the Neptunian energy of like transcendence, spirituality, dreaming, and the Jupiterian energy of, I think that's how you say it, Jupiterian energy of expanding our stories we have about ourselves here on Earth, and like expanding our lives, allowing places we're in, jobs we're in, relationships we're in, all sorts of things to change, mutable fire sign, so, but with faith. So yeah, that's kind of an ongoing theme. I just think in general this can be a really, potentially really like hot time, and I would advise sort of tiptoeing around isn't the right way to say it, because I don't mean avoiding, but more so like look at how the things that are coming up are bringing stuff up in the inner world, and like spend time sitting with that and processing the best way to approach conversations or action in the outer world around those conflicts, because I don't think that there's going to be too much like resolution or clarity right now, and I think things are really emotional and really heavy, and so my advice would be that sort of just taking that extra, like not being reactionary. And yeah, we've also got a square between Uranus in Taurus and Mars in Leo, which is kind of just like pretty stubborn and just can be sometimes, I think, a little maybe unemotional, or I think that Cancer energy can just sort of feel like this like wounded or like bullied kid. I think that's kind of like the vibe, and like that I think is where our love and attention is really kind of needed right now, is like that part of all of us, and like being maybe more patient with ourselves and with others as we kind of like sit with some of that, knowing that there's going to be growth that's possible. So I'm going to pull some cards and then wrap this baby up. Woo. All right, so start off with the Eight of Pentacles. This is like, we don't need to be working so hard. I think sort of just like observing the abundance we have and that we've created for ourselves, sort of like taking a moment to just rest and be sort of take inventory, I think, of what we've got going on. The Ace of Wands, I think there's really hopeful new stuff that's coming up at this time right now, and lots of new beginnings and new starts, and there's this like really creative energy there that I think really self-expressive, really creative, really freeing, and really joyful and playful, and like that's kind of what we're generally being called to. And then we're like, after all this, we're like busting into Leo season, and I think there's going to be hopefully some lightness coming with that, and sort of, yeah, this just fun that is possible. And then this is the Hanged Man in traditional decks, like limbo, and uncertainty. And I think that that's probably a lot of what this Mercury retrograde and the Neptune sort of stuff is about, is just kind of being in the in-between and like not having clarity and just kind of being okay with not having clarity. So yeah, I think that will do it for today. I hope that this can be helpful, and yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or are interested in having your own chart read. I'm going to be in Burlington until the end of August, and then I'm moving away. So if you're in Burlington and are interested in a reading, August is an awesome time for me. So, alright, I will talk to y'all soon.